Greetings and congratulations on the journey that you are about to begin. My name is Dr. David Strickley. I am the Chief Academic Officer for Nations University, and I wanted to give you an orientation to the Masters of Divinity program at Nations University. It is a unique program because it is completely online and you have to do a lot of work both locally and with your faculty that are involved. So we wanted to make sure you knew what was involved and give you some hints and some suggestions for how to successfully complete the Masters of Divinity program. The MDiv, as we call it, is a professional degree in ministry. It's a graduate level degree, and as such, there are a lot of expectations that come with it. As a ministry program, it expects you to be able to implement a variety of projects. It allows you to improve your ability to implement programs and plan programs. There'll be a lot of requirements that make it very beneficial for you as it teaches you to do the many aspects of ministry. It's also a graduate degree, which means that it involves research, and it will involve a lot of reading and a lot of studying materials written by scholars and professionals in the field. And you'll be expected to bring those together. Some of your courses like M12 or M13 will be very practical and will help you with the practice side of it, but they'll also integrate some of the theory. Other courses are more balanced blend, like MRS 550, which deals with ecclesiology and church leadership. And of course, there are the heavy research courses like M17 that you probably already took, and courses like MFI 5 and M14, which are the two concluding courses. I want to mention something about those so that you understand how this will end. You will take a lot of different courses that will total between 84 and 90 hours of programming, including any work you might have done in the Masters of Theological Study program here at NationsU. But these last two courses are two halves of one project. In MFI 5, Church and Society, you'll be studying how to research for ministry. You'll be interviewing lots of people. You'll be asking questions about church, about community. You'll be asking questions about the relationship between them and how your congregation perceives those different aspects of ministry so that you can build a context for ministry and identify needs. You'll continue that as you research the different aspects of ministry. Some of that will be through literature review, and some of it will be through additional interviews of your congregants as you continue to develop your ministry. So a lot goes on in MFI 5 that lays the theoretical foundation and also begins to outline the possible ministry projects. When you get to the end of MFI 5, you're going to propose a prospectus. You're going to write a prospectus that says, this is what I think I want to do. And your professor will say, okay, I think you're on the right track. At that point, you will be moved to M14. And in M14, you will do your research design, put everything together. You will add the research component to it. You'll look at the statistical methods that you might want to use. You will look at in-depth research design. Are you going to use post-test along with pre-test? Are you going to have a post-test only model? Are you going to do interviews? Are you going to have a questionnaire? If you're going to be measuring changes in attitudes, how are you going to do that? If it's measuring increased attendance, then there's another method for doing that. So all of these things come together as you enter M14. And then as you put that together, you put your final proposal together that includes your literature review that you did in MFI 5. It talks about the review that you did, the interviews, that you did, and how those were informed by the literature and how they informed your design. You'll put all that together and propose that to the professor for M14. When the professor dialogues with you, provides feedback, you will sharpen the focus of that paper, of that proposal, and then ultimately you will receive approval to implement that project. It is highly recommended that you design a project that you can begin at any time. It's oftentimes a student's desire to implement a project around Christmas time, but they're not starting this course until December 1st, and there's no time to put together a project in that short a period of time. So consider a 3 to 6 month time frame before your project, and then about 3 months after after you implement the project to complete it and to begin writing up your evaluation report. As you finish all of those pieces, then you will have your complete Masters of Divinity professional paper. It will be long and it will be detailed and it will be measured, and we will be able to decide whether or not you have successfully completed the program. I will serve on your committee, and there'll be a couple of other professors and perhaps a local person from your area that will help you with that. So that's kind of how everything works between the two classes. As you get to the end of that, you can only enroll in those two courses with the approval of your advisor and the approval of the Masters of Divinity advisor. So lots going on as you work through your courses and as you approach the end of this program. It's not a short program, but it is extremely, extremely valuable. Mentioning local supervisors reminds me that there's a couple of things about this program that is not unique, but that you need to take into consideration. First of all, the program is extremely contextualized. Your project, whatever you do, needs to work for your cultural and local context. If you are in Nairobi, you need to design a project that works in that Kenyan setting. We don't want you to take a project that you read about that worked in Boston, Massachusetts, or Dallas, Texas, or London, England, and just try to copy it. You need to research. You need to decide, will this work? That's part of the literature review. That's part of your research. You need to design a project that will work in your context. And that's extremely important because your context is different than any other student's context that may be going through this program. It also means that you're going to have a cooperating congregation. What that means is that as a Master's of Divinity student, you are learning to be a professional minister. That means you need to have a congregation who is willing to let you put into action what you're learning. You're going to design a ministry project in M12. The congregation has to say, we're willing to let them conduct that ministry project. M13 will have some worship projects. You need to have a congregation that will support you in that and allow you to do that. A cooperating congregation does not provide financial support to you unless you're already a paid minister there. They are simply providing you a venue for the implementation of the many projects that you will conduct during the course of the Masters of Divinity program. In addition to the cooperating congregation, you will need a local supervisor. It will probably be someone in your cooperating congregation, but it doesn't have to be. It needs to be someone who is familiar with your area, where you live, where you work, where these projects are being implemented. Someone needs to be there that can guide you and can listen to your ideas and provide feedback. As academicians, as faculty, we will provide a lot of feedback on design and theory and theology, but you need a local supervisor who is able to really help you fashion your project so that it works in the setting in which you're trying to implement it. So you'll need to have the cooperating congregation, and you'll need a letter from them sent to your advisor so we can put it in the file. And you'll also need a local supervisor identified that can help you with that. So those two requirements are critical as you begin if you are not actively involved in a congregation, you need to find one that will let you become actively involved and will let you participate in this program. So keep all of that in mind as you begin this program. I also wanted to give you some advice, if you will, things that you will need to think about as you begin this program. In a sense, these are requirements for succeeding in the Masters of Divinity program. So I want to spend just a couple of minutes running over about 7 or 8 of these suggestions. One is learn the theological foundations of ministry. It is often very easy to just implement a program or an idea that has no scriptural rationale or scriptural foundation. Make sure as you work through this program, whether it's M12, M15, MFI5, whatever the course is that you're taking, if it requires a ministry project or requires you to apply that course material within a ministry setting, make sure that you really learn the theological foundation of that ministry. That will ensure that you are growing scripturally, spiritually, and it will also ensure that your projects are biblical. And that is the most important thing about any ministry. You also need to learn the theoretical foundation of ministry. It's a little bit different. It relates more to the social science side of things. You need to understand that there are theories out there that can inform ministry. If you want to do work in substance abuse or addiction, you want to offer a ministry that helps people with that, then you need to understand that there are theories related to substance abuse. If you want to do pastoral care, there are theories that relate to pastoral care. There's all kinds of things that are based on good theory, even education. Even if you just want to teach a course or develop some curriculum, there's pedagogy, and you need to take that into consideration. So understand the theoretical foundations of ministry as much as you understand the theological ones. Third, work through the tension between theology and social sciences. There are a lot of people that feel like when you start looking into sociology or you start looking into psychology that you have forsaken theology. And that is not completely true. There is a tension there. Social sciences deal with people and they deal with science, society. Theology deals with our understanding of God. And so there is a point of contact between the two. There's some overlap that is very useful. But you must also realize that there will be times when social sciences and science in general don't fully integrate into your theological worldview. And so you have to work through that tension as you work through this program. Another thing is to integrate research and practice. You're going to be reading a lot. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to do a lot of research and a lot of literature reviews. And as you do that, you need to make sure that you are really synthesizing that material in such a way that it can be integrated into your ministry practice. That's a big step, and that's what the Masters of Divinity program is designed to help you do, is help you with their integration. There needs to be a very clear and connection between what I've read and what I understand about ministry and how I'm implementing that. So bring those together effectively. In fact, that's usually going to be the basis of your hypothesis or your thesis and your studies is this is what I believe is true and this is how I'm going to put this into practice. In order to be successful in ministry, you're going to have to learn to set measurable and meaningful goals for your ministry projects. All too often, we get ministry goals that sound something like, I'm going to save the world, or I'm going to reach every lost people group in the entire world, or I'm going to turn this church around. Those aren't ministry goals. Those are not certainly measurable. They're not realistic. They're not meaningful. And so you're going to have to learn to write very measurable and very meaningful goals, whether that's in a a small ministry project where you might only have one or two goals, or your Masters of Divinity project in which you might have several goals. You may have process goals, outcome goals. There's all kinds of things going on in these projects. And so you're going to need to learn to set these measurable and meaningful goals. One way to do that is to use what is called SMART goal. That stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And there's examples of this in the sheet that accompanies this video on the course menu. So I'm not going to go through there, but I'll read one to you, the example that's in there. A good SMART goal reads, by the end of the 13-week class on soteriology, 75% of class attendees will improve their understanding of God's plan of salvation by 10% or more based on pre- and post-test assessments. That's a mouthful, but if you begin to realize what it says, I have a certain period of time that I'm going to implement this course, and of the people who attend that class, I expect that at least 75% of them will improve their understanding of God's plan of salvation by 10% on a pre-test, post-test. So if my average on the pre-test was 80 and my average on my post-test is 88, then I've met my goal of increasing the understanding by 10%. Very, very specific, very measurable, very attainable. Those are the kind of things that you want. And that needs to be developed well, and you need to use that in every course that requires a goal in this program. Along with setting goals is learning to do research. You'll be reading a lot of other people's research. You'll be planning ministries, and you will be setting goals for those ministries, but you also need to be able to do the research to show whether or not your ministry projects have been successful. That can be a real challenge because as ministers, we are primarily practitioners, but as an academician, you must also be a researcher. And so you've got to kind of bring these together and do both at the same time. So that means that you're going to develop goals, you're going to have measurable goals, and then you're going to have to test those goals. Was there a significant change in the understanding of this group of people? If you're trying to measure pre and post test, then you might wind up using something called the student's t-test. If you're looking at changes in attendance, you might use an interrupted time series analysis. These are research techniques that you're going to need to learn in order to show your committee that you have really done good research and that your project has been successful. I will say from a personal standpoint that I did a study one time many decades ago, and my project was 100% a failure, which meant it was 100% successful. I had hypothesized that the more premarital counseling a couple has, the better their marriage communication will be after they get married. After I did all of my testing, it turned out that there was absolutely no relationship whatsoever between premarital counseling and marital communication and satisfaction. The reason, based on the research, was that people live very, very idealistic lives when they're dating. They don't lie to each other, but they put forward their best self. And after they get married, they go back to being who they really are. Well, during premarital counseling, everyone's trying to look really good for their future spouse. And so they idealize and they gloss over, and suddenly you're not getting very effective counseling. So my complete failure, my zero correlation, if you will, between these two variables turned out to be a great success because I learned something very important. There must be honesty and transparency in premarital communication for it to be effective. So Research is funny. A great failure can also be a great success. Of course, that's true of all science. We often talk about how many times scientists fail in their research before they're finally successful. That can be true for you as well. You may think you have this great idea and it all seems reasonable, and you conduct a ministry project and it falls horribly on its face, and you have to go back and ask yourself, why didn't this work? That's the challenge. And from that, you grow, and your next ministry project will then be better because you have taken the time, because we will make sure that you take the time to evaluate your project and ask, did it work or did it not? And why or why not? That's what research is about. Another thing that's very important is that you work very closely with others. In much of your education, especially at Nations University, you've done it on your own. It's been asynchronous, it's been independent, but now you're going to need to start working with others. You're going to be working with volunteers, you're going to be working with supervisors, you're going to be working with a lot of different people, people in the community even. And so work closely with them. Do not do this program in isolation. You will not be successful. I hate to put it that way, but if you're not working closely with the people around you, your project will not be successful, and therefore you will not be successful. So talk to people, let people provide you guidance. Let your supervisor be critical and say, no, that's not a good idea. Listen to what they say and use that advice. And last, and certainly not least, and perhaps should be first, is when you finish doing all of your research, and as you work through your research, you need to write well. Can't emphasize this enough. Your paper must be almost perfect. It must be at a minimum professional quality. When you finish this paper, it needs to be styled after the APA style guide. It should have good editing done. It should look well. It should look good. It should read well. It should have everything that a good professional paper needs. In fact, it would be wonderful if after you finished your project, you could even consider having it published, because that is always a great goal for a Master's of Divinity student. So that's kind of the long version of the orientation for this program. But I wanted you to have this information because it's going to take you a couple of years, 2 to 4 probably, depending on where you're starting, to finish all of the requirements for this program. I want you to understand up front what's expected. I want you to understand what is beneficial to you and these different suggestions we've made. Work through this program and you will be successful. If you rush through it, you won't be. We've had many students who have tried to finish this quickly, and it has resulted in horrible programming, horrible ministries, horrible projects, and no growth. Take your time to do this well. And I cannot reiterate that enough, especially when you come to your project. Make sure you give yourself 9 to 12 months to do your project. You'll start developing ideas for your project early on. So by the time you get to MFI 5, you should be able to dive right into the interviews and the research and really start working on fleshing out, if you'll allow me to use that term, building out your ministry design fairly quickly. But give yourself time to do the research, give yourself time to do the interviews, give yourself time to develop a good prospectus. Then as you move to M14, give yourself time to develop a good research design. All of that before you ever begin the implementation of your project. So plan well, plan ahead, and work hard, and you'll do fine. Above all, pray regularly for not only your success in this program, but pray for the impact that you will have on the people to whom you're ministering. God bless you, and may He bless your project, and again, the people that you come in contact with through it.